Ralph, thanks so much for joining us, man, on short notice. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. So let's take it back to yesterday, how it kind of all unfolded, and you get that first phone call from Bowlsby.
Yeah, well, first I want to credit my colleague Pete Thamel over at Yahoo. He had the news of the cease and desist order being sent to ESPN from the Big 12 first. You start scrambling, right? And reach out to Bowlsby. And the interesting thing people have to understand with Bob Bowlsby, among all the people in college athletics, he is probably the most forthcoming. He is a person who returns calls. He is not afraid to say things publicly. If he has something to say, he's usually pretty comfortable saying it. Reached out to him. He called me back within a couple of seconds. I guess I was just a little lucky. I was the first one to get the call back. And he definitely had something to say. Quite frankly, it caught me off guard. He has been laying low for the past week or so. And basically what he says, listen, I just haven't had anything to say. I've been gathering information. I felt like we've been unclear at what exactly was going on. And then he starts sort of going off on ESPN and the SEC, especially ESPN, to the point where I was like, I got to get a pen here, right? It just happened so fast. I wasn't quite sure if we were even on the record. And yeah, I mean, listen, again, he explained it in greater detail to some other outlets, but he basically said, like, they feel ESPN at this point is trying to undermine the Big 12, get it to crumble by having other conferences pick it apart, most notably, and Bob Bowlsby did not say this, but I got this from some other sources, working with the American Athletic Conference to create a situation where the Big 12 is destabilized, crumbles, and that allows Texas and Oklahoma to move to the SEC quicker and without paying a massive amount of buyout money.
Rob, what kind of proof or evidence can he have to help support this? Because it looks like it's going to go to a courtroom at some point.
It certainly could. Listen, a lot of this could be very much posturing and leverage plays when they get together, they being the Big 12 and Texas, Oklahoma, getting in a room to try to settle before it goes to a court. Hey, what number will make this work for you? Now, Bowlsby, again, said he's got proof, definitive proof. He's confident. Again, he's a person who likes to say things when he feels like he's confident, but he wouldn't say what that was. When you dig around, I will put it this way. You start putting a couple of things together. Administrators in this business talk to one another. They're all friends. There are people who are athletic directors in the Big 12 who had been athletic directors in the American Athletic Conference, right? So these people know each other. And what I've gathered from talking to folks is, telephones started buzzing and words started getting around. Hey, I'm getting these calls and people are telling me this. And I think some of that got back to the Big 12. I think this, when people start talking, there are enough connections in this business that word got back to the Big 12 that, hey, something is going on here that should interest you and that might not be kosher.
So how do you think this plays out today when the SEC presidents get together, knowing this is in the background?
Yeah, it's interesting. I asked somebody about, does this slow the train down? And it doesn't sound like. Now, the SEC presidents there's no guarantee they're going to vote today. And I think that the nature of that is everybody in college sports will tell you, man, we don't predict what the presidents do. They're the bosses. They get to do whatever they want. I think that it's probably fair to expect a vote today. And I did wonder if all the circus of yesterday might make the president say, well, maybe we should let that settle for a little bit. We have some time here. But I'm expecting a vote. I personally, from reading the tea leaves, still expecting a vote today. So I think that train's going to keep on going. And there are meetings scheduled, Board of Regents, at OU and Texas tomorrow, where the next step would be, okay, today the SEC votes to extend an invitation. And then the next step tomorrow would be those schools saying, yes, we will accept an invitation. But it's really important. As of right now, everybody is officially working on the timetable of 2025 as an exit.
Do you think that's realistic, though? Or maybe this, whatever happened, pushed everything back? Or no, it's still going to happen when it happens?
I would be, let's put it this way. I'm taking the under on 2025. I actually think that when the 2022 football season kicks off, Texas and Oklahoma will be in the SEC. Now, I might be a little bullish on that. You'll ask other people and they'll say, well, maybe 2023, because 3 years worth of buyout. I mean, what kind of numbers are you talking about? But I think that as much as the Big 12 has a lot of leverage here, because they have within their bylaws, hey, listen, you owe us a lot of money if you leave. We have a legal contract that's still in place here. So the Big 12 has a fair amount of leverage, but it doesn't totally behoove the Big 12 to wait around here either. Like, they have a future to think about. What does their going about reconstructing their conference, rebuilding, getting that in place so they can take it to potential TV partners for the next television deal. The Big 12 probably will benefit from not letting this linger. I think they have more leverage, but the leverage that Texas and Oklahoma have is like, okay, we'll ride it out if you want, but is that really in your best interest? Like, for your future beyond Texas and Oklahoma?
Ralph, do you see any scenario where this blows up and Texas and Oklahoma aren't in the SEC?
Okay, so, Texas has a history here. I don't have to tell you guys. Right. So I would always say that if Texas is involved, there's always a little bit of an element of, well, we decided to do something different. I doubt that. Again, everything sort of there's been a lot of work put into this for several months here. Everything is pointing this direction. I don't see how it gets derailed. I think the worst case scenario is it doesn't happen until 2025. I think that's probably the worst case scenario if you're Texas and Oklahoma and if you're the SEC.
Ralph Russo with us here on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Ralph, let's take a look at the next couple steps that could happen. All right, so let's say they approve Texas and Oklahoma. What's next for the Big Ten, for the ACC, for the Pac-12, for the American Athletic Conference?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you have a lot of messages of we don't have to move, like from the Power Five conferences, from the other three, the ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, of, hey, we're okay where we are. We're not forced into anything. And I think there's some truth to that, right? Those 8 schools that are remaining from the Big 12, I don't know if they move the needle to the extent where any of the Power Five conferences feel we got to get them, right? But I would also say this. Let's not think in terms of the way we've thought before. Let's think bold. Let's think, essentially what the SEC is doing is sort of resetting the game. OU and Texas were free agents. They went after, were about to be free agents. They went after the biggest free agents. Who are the next biggest free agents? Well, the Pac-12's deal is coming up. USC is a pretty big deal. Now you can say, well, they're all the way on the West Coast. What does the ACC have to do with USC? What would the Big Ten have to? But I think that we're resetting all those dynamics here. Who's the big free agent? Can we go after them? Does the Pac-12 think, listen, we're in a little bit of a precarious situation here. Maybe then we do need to make some proactive moves here. Does that mean grabbing some of these Texas schools from the Big 12? Does that mean going to the Big 10 and saying, hey, can we get something together here? Maybe not an exact pure merger, because maybe what they're doing is preempting the Big 10 going, no, we'll take half your teams. So I don't know what's coming next, but I think when you get people in positions of anxiety and worrying about what's next, you might get some moves that are bold, irrational, somewhere between bold and irrational. I think you have actors who might decide like, no, I can't wait. I have to do something. I don't think that's the logical next step. I think the logical next step is more conservative. The 8 Big 12 teams look for 2 replacements and they try to just reconstitute the conference. But when you throw a grenade in the room, you're going to shake things up in ways that you might not see coming.
Ralph, I forget who had the report, but it said basically that this college football playoff expansion to 12 teams may have to actually be delayed a little bit because of all the stuff that's going on. Why is that, you think?
Well, so I would agree with that. I also think that maybe we had sort of set some unrealistic expectations on how quickly that would be. I think there was this momentum going that, they'll have it in place by 2023 because of course they will. I think that there were already some factors that could have slowed that down. I think anything that makes the conferences step back and go, okay, what exactly do we have here? Like, does what we have in play conference-wise fit the structure that we're talking about? Maybe we should slow down, because if we're going to have the 6 best conference champions, well, does that work with the conferences that are left? Are we going to have 6 conferences that deserve to have their champion in this? So any disruption, not to mention what it means to ESPN, what it means to potential buyers. Hey, listen, if I'm the Big 12 and maybe the Pac-10, the Big 10 and the Pac-12, do I say, listen, SEC, this was a little bit much here. We want this thing to go to market now. We don't want to just send it all to ESPN. We want to maybe have embolden Fox a little bit and have this playoff be on 2 different networks as opposed to just one. And to have that happen, you'd have to take it to market and wait out until 2025. So everything is connected here. So anytime one thing moves, one thing shifts, it's probably going to slow down something else because they have to assess what it means to that.
Ralph, big picture, what do you think all this means for Texas A&M?
Listen, I think Texas A&M is in a great position because I think what's happening now is Greg Sankey is forcing the rest of college football, which is in a huge state of change, college athletics, to sort of coalesce around the SEC, right? Now, Texas A&M is a big fish anyway, so I don't think Texas A&M had to worry too much. Though, listen, I don't, as your fans probably have been talked about for a few days, right? Like, do we really want Texas in here? Do we really want Oklahoma in here? On the field, there might be some things that you don't like, but I think institutionally, Texas A&M is in the best spot right now because I think as things change and as this evolves over the next 10, 15, 20 years, things are going to now coalesce around the SEC. That's the place you want to be, and that's where Texas A&M is.
Ralph, last thing for you. Do you see the SEC stopping at 16 teams, or do you think, who knows, in this college football landscape, we could see 20, 24, their own league?
Yeah, no, and that's what I was, when I was talking about coalescing around the SEC, I could see something like that where all of a sudden there is this sort of 40-team, 40-school semi-pro model that is the SEC and attachments to it. So that's maybe very big picture long term. I think more short term, listen, those ACC schools we're dealing with a grant of rights with OU in Texas right now and how much money that's going to cost. Those ACC schools have a grant of rights through 2035, I think maybe even 2036. So you're a little limited. Again, think free agents. Think who's going to be free to move around over the next few years. Those Pac-12 schools might. Does the SEC want to get on board with USC? That seems like a bit much right now. My guess is for the short term, the SEC has what it needs and wants. But I do think, again, for the longer term, the SEC has set itself up to be a magnet where, okay, everybody sort of groups around us and we build out from there.
Ralph, big fan of your work. Thanks so much for joining us here on TexAgs Radio.
Hey, thanks. Have a great day.
You too.